What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. If you watched our video last night, we talked about how Jake Muzzin was put onto the LTIR and freed up $5.625 million of cap space while he remains injured, remains out of this lineup. We talked about how there becomes endless possibilities for trades that this Leafs team could make and how it becomes much easier for them to fit numerous guys into this thing, more than just going out and acquiring one defenseman or two lower-end defensemen. Now there is opportunity for a defenseman and a forward, or a really big defenseman or a really big forward. And just so happened to be named 2 nights ago during the Leafs broadcast against the Columbus Blue Jackets, Elliot Friedman brought up the fact that he thinks JT Miller would be a good fit in Toronto. Now, he didn't necessarily come at this from the perspective of he had inside information or he believed this would be happening, but he did say that he thinks JT Miller would be a great fit for this Toronto team, and he thinks that if Toronto had interest, they could easily make this trade happen. And now, mind you, that was prior to Jake Muzzin being announced as being put on the LTIR and freeing up that cap space. So we are here today to break down the JT Miller possibility of him coming to Toronto, if that would be a fit, how we think he would impact this team, and what potentially might have to go out the door the other way. Before we get into that, I want to remind everybody, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, make sure you do so. We're on the road to 2,000 subscribers, and we're getting mullets at the playoffs if we get to 2K. We're growing our hair out until then. We will wait day one of the playoffs. We will go and get mullets. We'll have nice mullets rocking in the post-game reaction after game one. So if you want to see that happen, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Stick around to this channel and see what else we got to break down. But as far as the JT Miller situation goes, Goody, without getting into analytics or his cap hit or anything like that, JT Miller as a fit, as a player, as a person, anything you think, how do you think he would fit here in Toronto? Would he be an effective, impactful player?
He'd be an absolute horse. I think that immediately, I can't help but mention that if you could 1-for-1 swap him out with Kerfoot, and the reason I go to that, I mean, essentially you will need to give up something in the trade here. Just thinking about our lineup with him there instead of Kerfoot, no disrespect to Kerfoot, but that's a playoff ready team. I mean, this guy is a legitimate horse. He can do everything out there on the ice. He's a grinder. I feel like he's got that kind of flexibility that he can play pretty much anywhere in your lineup. And I don't know, he'll just bolster out that left side even more and hopefully help that second line get going. I think bringing in a guy like JT Miller could spark up this team big time. JT and JT playing together on the second line, William Nylander having a great year. I feel like that is a trade that, of course, the Leafs would be interested in. And I feel like, you know, with what you could give up, especially prospect-wise, I'm thinking about Nick Robertson here, you could probably make that happen. But what do you think the price is going to be on him?
Well, we talked in the video last night about Kerfoot and how his percentage of having to move on might be lowered because of this Muzzin transaction, and I agree with that, but here's what I'll say. I think if JT Miller were to come to Toronto, Kerfoot would have to be the piece that would have to go out. And I think this is for numerous reasons. One thing you look at is cap space that we're ultimately going to have to end up with once we start acquiring these players. Alex Kerfoot sits there at $3.5 million playing on the left wing of the second line, and that second line altogether has been relatively ineffective as of late. I mean, you look at this season, Kerfoot is a plus 13. He's still locked in for next season, but he is $3.5 million. John Tavares and William Nylander on this year, they are both in the minus, in the plus minus for throughout this entire season. Now I look at other things. Bunting, he's going nowhere. Ilya Mikheyev, he's going nowhere. Pierre Engvall, I wouldn't be as far to say he's not going anywhere, but what I would say is that when you're considering bringing in bigger name guys, i.e. JT Miller, who comes in at a $5.25 million AAV, you're probably going to have to save some space on your cap, which means that a guy who comes in at $1 million is going to be much more reasonable to keep around to play on your fourth line than a guy at 3.5, because you're ultimately looking at who's going to play on the fourth line. You're probably going to pick the guy at $1.5 million and fit in the cap than the guy at 3.5. So I think that could be a move. What I will say on top of this though, Goody, is that there will have to be some type of pick or prospect or something along with it. But I think if it's Kerfoot going the other way, it lessens the damage of the futures that have to go back to Vancouver, because JT Miller has one more year left on his contract, and so does Alex Kerfoot. So essentially, in both senses, both teams get guys who will be there for the next year. And the other thing to look at here of a guy who might be willing to do that, and Vancouver might be willing to take him on, Alex Kerfoot is from the Vancouver area. So, I mean, for him to go home, go back and play there, it could be a good thing for all parties involved. But that being said, I do think it would have to be Kerfoot and something.
Right. And I agree with that completely. And the reason I say that Kerfoot would probably need to go, because last night we did talk about how Muzzin being off the books on the LTIR makes a huge difference for us. That exact amount of cap space he's leaving over, you got to put that to a defenseman first and foremost. Your forwards could benefit from getting JT Miller. That is no doubt. Virtually any team could. But the defenseman is really what we're going to need to go out and deliberately replace Muzzin with. Because
that's true.
If we're going to take care of this LTIR and take the most advantage of it, at very least, we got to fill the void that Muzzin's leaving, because there is no guarantees that he's coming back, even though we are optimistic about that. So the JT Miller move would need to be secondary. To be honest with you, I don't know if I'd want to see it if it came before the defenseman move. Of course, I'd be like juiced up about it, but just speaking pragmatically, I wouldn't want to be under the gun at trade deadline trying to make something happen on our blue line because we put all of our assets and cap space into making JT Miller come here. Thankfully, after Dzingel clears waivers, we are in a better cap space. Muzzin's off the books. He has like the most pricey contract even out of the guys that we want to go get. It probably won't be a big deal, but you get what I'm saying here in principle. Yeah. You got to take care of that blue line, and then we look at the cherry on top like JT Miller, because and also what you said about Engvall, completely accurate. You got to take into account that this is a cap heavy team with your forwards. So if you have a guy playing as good as Pierre Engvall making $1 million, I mean, like that right there is compounded value. Yeah. So you might need to look to Kerfoot to be the guy that's expendable, which I think he's a good match with Vancouver. I think they would consider that, but you're right. Sprinkling in a little bit of draft compensation or a prospect, maybe both, I don't know. I think at least one will be necessary.
No, I don't disagree that the primary move here is defenseman. You get a defenseman because the other thing is you have to replace Jake Muzzin. No matter what, you have to replace him. And are you going to try to do that internally? I'd think not. They're already looking to upgrade on defensemen who are in the system. So you probably don't want to move a guy who's already here up into that spot and get a lower end guy. The first thing they're going to have to do is go and get a defenseman who can play in the top four probably. Now, as far as JT Miller goes, though, I am very, very high on this guy and very high on any possibility we have to go and get him. You do it. JT Miller is a 6'1", 218-pound left-handed shot. He plays left wing and center. He's only 28 years old, and he's under contract for next season. Now, getting into some of his stats here, I'm going to go to first the past couple of seasons before we break down this year, but his first year in Vancouver, 2019-2020, he played 69 games. He had 27 goals, 45 assists, 72 points, and guess what, Goody? He was first in points on the Vancouver Canucks that season with his 72 by 6 total points ahead of the next guy. His second season in Vancouver, 2021, he played 53 games. He had 15 goals, 31 assists, 46 points in those 53 games. He was second in points on the Vancouver Canucks, only by 3 behind Brock Besser. And then getting to this season here, I mean, you look at JT Miller's stats, the guy has 50 games played, 18 goals, 35 assists, 53 points, and guess what? JT Miller leads the Vancouver Canucks in points by 14 with his 53. This guy is a horse. He's a guy who can create on his own. That Vancouver team has not been very good the last 2 seasons, and he has still managed to put up pretty good numbers, either point per game or very, very close to. He's doing so again this season. He's leading that team, which is not very good. And if you watch highlights or you watch this guy on just a game-to-game basis, the things he does every time he's out on a shift, he is a driver. He's a guy who can pick up energy and get things going, and that might be exactly what John Tavares, William Nylander, and this Leafs team as a whole need heading into the playoffs. I think he would be an incredible fit, and I think if the possibility's there, you go get him.
Oh, bro, I am jacked up about the idea of JT Miller. That would be like, man, I think Leafs fans know what I'm talking about. I'm having trouble describing it, but if you get JT Miller on your second line and keeping everything the way it is, and then you get another defenseman in, like, let's just say a Manson or a Sherratt, someone who's going to bring you some grit and experience, bro, the Leafs are a friggin' wagon at that point. I won't lie. Looking at teams like Florida, looking at teams like Calgary, Tampa, it's going to be an uphill battle with depth, but that puts you right in the same tier. I mean, you could already argue that we are in that top contending tier. Like, I personally believe we are, but every other NHL team is going to look at us and say the first round. So we'll take it as it goes. But I think on paper, that's no doubt the best Leafs team I've seen in a really long time in the modern era of hockey.
Yeah. I think it also just takes this top six to another level. And you look at the things that have happened in the past couple of seasons. Tavares gets injured last year, and then Nylander and Kerfoot play really well. But what happens? The first line was shut down. So then you have no more depth moving there. I don't think that first line is going to get shut down this year. I genuinely don't. I think that they're going to produce. I think they have to produce. We've seen Matthews completely step up his game and be a different player, a difference maker out there. And I think he carries that into the playoffs. And I think he has much more of a playoff mentality. The other thing is he's playing alongside a guy in Michael Bunting who drags you into the fight every single shift you're on the ice. So adding a guy like JT Miller to the second line who does so, then you look down at the third line and you got Kasha who does so, and then you look at the fourth line, even between Simmons and Spezza, they do that enough on their own for that fourth line. Every line is going to have a guy to step up and just pull you in the fight.
Man, it is a damn good team if you can get all those moves done. And think about the grit too. Like, I know this is like kind of corny to think immediately, how tough are you? How many guys on the roster fight? How many would be good at it? Like, I mean, if you have like Ilya Bushkin there, along with, like a Manson or like a Sherratt, plus you have Wayne Simmons in there, you have guys like Kasha who likes to stir it up. I don't know. I feel better about our level of grit. Kyle Clifford in the dungeon of the Scotiabank Center, just waiting to be let loose. But you get what I mean. I think we have the skill and the grit mixed in pretty well if we can get it pulled off all in that way. TJ Brody, he's not a fighter at all, but he's a lot of jam too. I think we're ready to play playoff hockey, and this isn't a team that's going to sacrifice skill for grit. I think that this is going to be one of the better teams we've seen in a while, and I'm really hoping that Kyle Dubas goes all in with his chips, but I trust him to. He's made the right moves at past trade deadlines. I would honestly blame coaching more than anything, and then the players right there, and then the management. So, I mean, they're pretty far down the blame tree in my books. I know a lot of people would dispute that with me, and that's totally fine. I get we've had a lot of free agents walk away, but at the end of the day, it's because we felt like a contender every time, and he's made the right moves to help the team, ride the momentum and feel like contenders. We're getting guys to help us do it. Foligno, I know it didn't work out, but I think this year is going to be, it's different, man. Matthews and the boys are ready to break through. He doesn't have a jib anymore, so if he can leave that out, playoff hockey is on the menu.
Well, and I mean, you look at this team, you add a guy like JT Miller, you've added Lyubushkin, maybe you go out and you get a Sherratt. When you start to hear that team, you hear the makeup of this team, you look at it on paper, it sounds, it looks, and it feels a lot more like a playoff hockey ready team than even where we sit at right now with these names, these guys on this roster. So it'll be interesting to see how things break down. But as we mentioned last night, we put out a video talking about Jake Muzzin being put on LTIR. Sandin at that point had been moved down to the Marlies. Christian Rubens and Brennan Mennel have been brought up to the Leafs. We are speculating, and I mean, maybe by the time this video is out, that something has changed in the meantime. Maybe those guys have been moved or someone's been traded. Who knows what will happen there? But with this cap space of Jake Muzzin being opened up, the possibilities of getting guys like JT Miller are significantly higher. And although no one has directly reported that this is going to be happening, Elliot Friedman's speculation that this would be a guy who would fit and Toronto could get it done if they wanted to has sent the Leafs, the Vancouver Canucks, and the hockey world into an absolute frenzy. So we will see what continues to happen over the next couple of days. But if you guys want to hear more about rumors, trades, injuries, game recaps, betting previews, you guys can all get that all here on this channel, on this Leafs Digest channel. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, help us get to 2K and get those mullets for the playoffs. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let us know if you think the Leafs should get JT Miller, and on top of that, what type of package would it have to be in order to get that guy in here? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like this video, hit that subscribe button. Leafs fans, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Keep believing.
Signing off.